This is Asake Online, Agriculture on Site. Welcome. In our program today, we're actually talking about a community initiative to actually help farmers look after their livestock, particularly in the background that farmers have actually been hit hard by El Nino-induced drought, particularly in Matabeleland, where a lot of farmers keep cattle for both sustenance as well as for business. My guest today is Dominic Graham, who is the Chief of Party at Cultivating New Frontiers in Agriculture, Amalima Loko, a USAID funded program. Graham, welcome to the program.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me in.
Maybe let's just start at the beginning, really. What motivated your program, actually, that you're working with the farmers, that you actually define as the livestock voucher scheme?
The livestock voucher scheme. Well, I think to talk about the livestock voucher scheme, we first have to take a little step back, and I'll tell you a little bit about the program itself. As you said, it's a USAID funded program. It began back in 2020. It's a 7-year program, so we're about midway through now. It runs through the end of 2027. And its target area is Matabeleland North, specifically looking at Hwange, Binga, Lupane, Nkai, and a small slice of northern Cholocho as well. The program is what's known as a resilience food security activity, which means its main ambition is to build household level food security, to strengthen incomes, and to build this idea of resilience, this idea that people can better cope with disaster, can better cope with misfortune, with the impact of negative events that may come their way. The program took a look in the early days at the area where we're working, at the communities that we wanted to work with, and felt that it would be best to work in multiple layers because of the fragility of the landscape. The soil is very sandy, it's very susceptible to erosion, it's not super fertile. It's quite hard to grow crops in that area. It's possible, but it's difficult. And so we felt that in order to build this resilient platform for communities and households, we really needed to also protect the environment within which they live. So the program has a body of work that looks at the catchment, the Gwai River catchment, looking at trying to protect the soils, to improve water retention and so forth within this landscape. Then it has second level, which is a community level, and then third, looking down at the household level where the voucher program belongs. On the community side, just to quickly interrogate that, we didn't come into Matabeleland North assuming that we knew better than the people who live there, what their circumstances are and what direction they would like things to take. So we started with a long process of what we called community visioning, which was discussions with villages, with groups of villages even, trying to unpick their ambitions, their aspirations for the future, where they would like their communities, their families to go in the future. We tried not to get too stuck in challenges and problems, and really just to look at the positives and see what could we do to help people to achieve these ambitions that they hold. After we'd been through that process, many of those plans then became formalized as village development plans, as ward transformation plans, adopted by local government as well as guidance for the work that they do. And it's been a great way of working, so we're able to collaborate with government initiatives, with community initiatives, and ourselves, all built around this idea of what does a community want to achieve. And then coming now to the household level, we have, again, a couple of streams of work. There's a lot going on in the program. Some of it around health and nutrition, looking specifically at household sanitation, issues like availability of latrines, looking at hygiene and proper disposal of refuse and this kind of thing. And then also on the nutrition side, looking to try to improve dietary diversity. So making sure that people are eating a good range of different nutritious foods, not just a couple of carbohydrate-rich staples. And we have a fairly modest supplementary feeding program, which we run together with clinics and medical establishments, and that targets specifically pregnant lactating women and children aged between 6 and 23 months of age. So it's a very sort of narrow group that benefit from that. But in the years since we began it, just over 100,000 people have now been involved in just that blanket supplementary feeding program. We work at quite a scale.
That's interesting, because you are now touching that this program is multifaceted. We are touching on nutrition, right. It looks at water, it looks at also just livelihood. And then I want to believe from this visioning, you then identified the issue of livestock benefits.
Yeah, that's correct. So specifically at the household level, when we talk with people about economics, about business, about how do they make money, how do they earn a living, one of the common themes that comes across almost all communities, all areas where we work, is the importance of livestock. And that can be, everything from the large cattle right down to poultry and everything else. But I would say ruminants, let's say that the cattle and to goats and similar are really the sort of the mainstay of the household when it comes to food security and income generation. So we have a range of different activities going on to try to help make livestock ownership more rewarding, more productive, more secure. So speaking a little now toward the voucher scheme. So there's a couple of things that really go into making livestock productive. I'm personally not such a big fan of breeds. I think it's great to have great breeds, but great breeds are also higher maintenance. You can have yourself a bicycle and it goes slowly, but it's easy to maintain, or you can have yourself a Ferrari, but it costs a fortune in fuel and everything else. And it's the same with cattle and with other animals as well. You can have the less productive, but cheaper to run, more resilient, they'll survive livestock, or you can go for the more fragile, more expensive, but more productive livestock. So we try to leave the breed question to one side. And then that leaves you with animal health and animal nutrition as really being the two drivers of productivity for livestock. And on the livestock health side, we do a lot of work together with veterinarian department and with coaching, training, community animal health workers, promoting the use of dip tanks and similar in the communities where we work. But the nutrition side, which is really what we're trying to get to, and I'm sorry we've gone round and round, but now we're narrowing down on the animal nutrition. The first point of call for animal nutrition within Matabeleland North is, of course, the open grazing lands. So we have a lot of work going on around grazing land management, around how communities can negotiate the best use of the grazing lands available to them, and how to move livestock at appropriate times of year, when to move livestock from one area to another, and all the rest of it. And again, together with those natural resource management activities I talked about, the purpose of it fundamentally is to improve animal nutrition, partly to help protect livestock during these tough periods when you have El Nino drought, such as we had this year, but also in the good years to promote productivity. You get more milk out of a well-fed cow than you do out of a cow that's less well-nourished. So that's the basis for it. Then underneath that, we also promote production of feed, fodder crops, and that kind of thing at the household level. With the voucher scheme itself, we, as with everyone else, it's been a tough year. And we could see that. We could see the farmers' households where we operate really struggling with this drought. Water sources are drying up. Livestock are having to walk further and further distances to reach the water. Many of the relief grazing areas are now really densely packed with livestock. They're being very heavily grazed. And so we felt, okay, fine. In the long term, we're trying to improve availability of animal nutrition. But in the short term, this is a crisis that needs its own response. And so we came up with this idea of a livestock stock feed voucher program. And the idea was, well, let's go to those individuals who own 5 or fewer head of cattle. We'll assume that if you have more than 5, you're better able to afford your own stock feed. Let's just narrow it down to those that have these very small numbers of livestock. And rather than just distribute stock feed free of charge to them all, let's instead create a voucher scheme with a discount so that people can buy stock feed at a price that makes sense for them, get that stock feed through, and then use it to help their livestock get through these last critical couple months before what we hope will be a good rainy season ahead.
That's interesting. Then maybe you could just explain to me how does this then voucher actually work, and how did you actually get the farmers to actually take it up, as well, to express the interest in it. Yeah, well, I'm sure one obvious benefit was, we're getting livestock feed.
Yeah. So it's an interesting question because there are several new things about it, at least new for us. And it did take some effort, let's say, to set up the scheme. The first, I should say, so the rationale for wanting to use vouchers in the first place, there are a couple of reasons for it. One is just that it makes logistics a lot simpler when it comes to distribution of the stock feed. So if someone holds a voucher, that means you deliver stock feed to them. If people don't have vouchers, then there's a lot more guesswork involved with just sending trucks of stock feed out into the countryside, hoping you'll find the right people and distributing the feed. So it made the whole logistics management a lot simpler if people had vouchers. The other reason was because we want to promote the value of stock feed. We want people to get in the habit, shall we say, of investing, whether it's money or time or effort or acreage within their farm, to start setting aside some resource specific to animal nutrition. And this is a way of sort of opening that possibility to people that, yes, stock feed is something that you can look to, whether it's only in an emergency or whether it's something you do routinely. It's possible. It's a tool that you can use when you have to. And then thirdly, we also felt that for most of the people who have between 1 and 5 cattle, they're not people who are typically going to buy stock feed. So if we limit the opportunity to people with these smaller number of cattle, we didn't feel we would be disrupting the market too much. We're not saying, okay, you already buy stock feed, you have 50 cows, now we'll give you a discount. It's nice to save people money, but the purpose was not to save money. The purpose was to protect the lives of animals. And so the reason for targeting was built around that. In terms of actually organizing the vouchers themselves, so Matabele North's a big place. We're a relatively small team. So what we did, there are these village savings and loans groups in almost every village across the districts where we work. And so we entered into agreements with a number of these groups, and we asked them to sell the vouchers on behalf of the program. They get a small commission for the sales that they make, and then they, using a mobile money application, they then transfer the money into a merchant account. So actually the administration happened through these voluntary village savings and loans groups. We didn't sell the vouchers ourselves at all. And I could say I was hugely impressed by how good of a job those groups did. It's amazing, really. They worked with thousands of farmers spread all across Matabeleland North, and we had very few mistakes, very few errors. They did a fantastic job of mobilizing in a very short time.
And what was the uptake actually then of farmers with the livestock feed?
So the program itself launched around about early October, and it just closed actually this week. So we're still putting the numbers together. I don't have exact numbers on the farmers themselves, but I expect it'll be around 2,500, 3,000 farmers. I do know that in the end, 1,261.95 metric tons of stock feed was distributed. So we can say for sure how much stock feed went out, but I'm not quite sure how many farmers benefited from that.
Yeah. And also, the rationale then of the farmers was also to avoid farmers actually getting livestock for free, as it were. And that encourage them to actually invest then in buying the livestock feed for themselves.
Yeah, there are several different things, and I think it's hard to say generically that all people had the same attitude to the program. We even found when we were when these village savings and loans groups were promoting the opportunity, when they were going out into communities offering these vouchers for sale, there were, I'd say, 3 distinct groups of farmers. Actually, there were those who were very eager, bought them on the day, and were ready to go. They really looked forward to getting the stock feed. Then there was another group that was a little more uncertain. They bought the vouchers, but it took them a few days to come around to the idea. I don't think that it's really something that many of these small farmers in Matabeleland North are familiar with. buying commercial stock feed is not something that they've really done in the past. And then there was a third group who just didn't, either didn't trust us or didn't believe the stock feed or didn't want it or whatever. And so they stayed out of the program altogether. I mean, I would say that having delivered the stock feed, all three groups are now one group. I think everybody would have loved to have bought this discount stock feed in retrospect, but at the time, that's what we found when we made the sales.
Initially, what was the response of the farmers, those who actually took it up, and what did they think of it?
So, it was about a 2/3 discount. So we were asking farmers to pay roughly about 1/3 of the cost of the stock feed. And then the program was also delivering the feed, not to the farm gate, but to a local distribution center. So it was a fairly, it was a good deal for farmers. It was a good discount. And the initial reaction from people, as I say, was very positive. For the most part, there was a lot of the vouchers got sold very, very quickly. We had village savings and loans groups who sold out actually very quickly and were coming back to us asking for a bigger allocation. And so that was the general mood, I would say. Where there were farmers who were reluctant, I feel it was mostly down to this lack of familiarity with purchasing commercial stock feed, that it was something new. And, you can't really... I understand the situation. It's difficult for people. They don't want to take a risk. They don't want to do unfamiliar things. Perhaps if a similar scheme was run again next year, it might be received differently. But I think because this was new, there are always going to be those individuals who are reluctant, let's say, to test something fresh. So there were these mixed views in the community.
Yeah, it is interesting because in Matabele North, in fact, I was looking at government statistics. It was just a number of more farmers actually in Matabele North were the hardest hit by the El Nino-induced drought. They lost a lot of livestock. Right. And also the same region where a lot of farmers had to cull because of the issue of feed. I'm even wondering here then, given that you had this program and it has been taken up by the farmers, what kind of feed did they actually have, the livestock feed that you have, and was it only feed? Did you provide any other support services?
So this initiative itself only sold stock feed to people. We did work together with the veterinary department on it because we knew people were unfamiliar with stock feed. So where the feed was being sold and distributed, veterinarians were on site, and they gave, I'm not sure if training is the right word, but they gave people instruction on how best to use stock feed to nourish their animals, not to misuse it. There have been these cases of urea poisoning and all the rest of it. So we were very careful to make sure that it was delivered to people together with the correct information so they could make best use of the stock feed when they got it. Outside of that initiative, we have been working for a while now to promote growing your own fodder crops and using those. There's also some government program now supporting that, which I think began actually last growing season. It's unfortunate that it was a tough growing season, but there was a support program in place even last growing season for that. And we also work with people on how to then create silage, how to mix animal feed. Essentially, you can make your own animal feed. You can grow your own fodder, you can mix ingredients, and you can make your own animal feed. And I think the message we would like to put across is that it's necessary in an emergency, but it still has value outside of an emergency. So if you remember a few minutes ago, we were talking about how a better nourished animal can produce more milk, for example. So if you can produce fodder, if you can produce animal feed at home or buy it in if you need it, use that to nourish your lactating cows, the cows that have calved that season, then you can extend your dairy season by a couple months. And it might not sound like a lot, but actually in practice, that's a big difference to a family with a relatively modest number of livestock. If you're going from let's say 4-month milking season to a 6-month milking season, that's a big difference for a family. And so the message is that animal nutrition, animal feed, animal fodder has value, good years and bad. Don't just see it as an emergency commodity that you come to in when there are these El Nino drought kind of conditions.
Interesting that then you mentioned that the program actually has come to an end just this week, right? And given that when you have already assisted, the farmers with the feed, I'm curious here to also understand farmers who actually benefited, from this voucher scheme. Yes. Are they now really convinced on the importance really of feeding your animals, as it were, particularly, and you making on your own effort to actually even grow your own feeds?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, one that I would like to know the answer to myself. I think, of course, they've put their own money in to buy the voucher in the first place. So to a certain extent, they must have had a sense of the value of this at the beginning. We've now completed delivery of the stock feed to those who bought the vouchers. And so now we're going through this process of reconciling all the vouchers and the receipts and making sure that everything's in line. And as part of that process, we're also having conversations with farmers all over Matabeleland North about how are you using the stock feed? Have you noticed any change in your animal's body condition? Is this changing your views on stock feed and so on? Unfortunately, I haven't got the answers back yet for you, but I agree. It's an important question and one that we're really paying attention to.
And lastly, this was an innovation, no doubt. What kind of insights, did you actually gain in actually launching this scheme? Right. And what do you hope you can actually take into the future, maybe replicating the intervention?
Sure. So the first sort of big insight, which I already touched upon actually, is almost a non-livestock one, which is, these village savings and loans groups, these informal, volunteer-based groups are far more effective, far more professional, shall we say, than you might expect. They really handled the administration of an innovative scheme very, very well. The numbers all line up, the vouchers were receipted, and all the documentation was good. So that was a big eye-opener for me. It made me feel like, okay, in future, if we wanted to work at scale with farmers, with communities, perhaps this is something we could look at using again, this network of groups who are out there and really doing a great job and very responsive to request. So that was the first. The second, on the livestock feed itself, we only launched the program early October. I feel like if we were to do it again, we'd want to go a bit sooner. It would have been better if we'd started, let's say, a month earlier. So if we could have got started with the voucher sales early September, we could have completed delivery by early mid-October, something like that. That would have been an ideal time slot. We're a little bit late coming in now. It still has great value to people. They're still, making good use of the stock feed. But I feel like if we'd gone a little earlier, it would have been timed better. So that's something we'll look at if we ever come to do this program again in the future as well.
Well, I do hope we'll see more of that being replicated, and maybe more farmers taking it up, and hopefully with being bigger and better, and with the new other insights for actually farmers, to ensure that they can actually save their livestock, particularly in a crisis situation like we've actually faced. There you are, listeners. It's very important that farmers should actually invest, in the feed for livestock. And this program that was actually launched by Cultivating New Frontiers in Agriculture, Amalima Loko, a USAID-funded program on the livestock vouchers, demonstrates that yes, farmers have the appetite to actually take up initiative where they can actually invest in livestock feed. This is actually a sake online, and we are actually joining Agriculture on Site, where my guest was actually Dominic Graham, who is the Chief of Party in Cultivating New Frontiers in Agriculture, Amalima Loko, a USAID program. Join us again next week for actually another episode where we'll actually be talking with the movers and shakers in agriculture and organizations that make agriculture, their business.